Butterscotch Shenanigans.
All right, everybody ready? So for this last talk, to kind of close out this night, I'm gonna try to make you think a bunch. So I hope that's okay. I know it's kind of late, but I promise you, if you make it out to the other side successfully, it's gonna be really good. So going through this myself to put this talk together and all the research required changed a lot of the way that I actually perceive the world. So I'm not guaranteeing I'm gonna do that for you, but that's the goal. So I'm Adam Coster. I'm from Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm one of the co-founders. We'll talk more about me later, but not too much. And again, I'm here to talk about thinking. More specifically, I want to talk about decision making. Because decisions are actually how we think. So thinking is just a sequence of decisions back to back.
Can you speak up, please?
Oh yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So decisions are how we think. We make decisions constantly, all the time, mostly without even being aware that we're doing that. So in our day-to-day lives, we're probably making, I don't know, some enormous number of decisions. And again, most of them are underneath your conscious. You're not even aware that it's happening. So while you're driving, you're making decisions all the time about what to do to keep from getting in an accident. When you walked into this room to choose a seat, there were lots of cues that were both conscious and subconscious that directed you where you were comfortable sitting, right? No matter what you do, you're being guided by decisions, and again, many of those are implicit. But what's a decision anyway? Decisions are just how we deal with uncertainty. These are just kind of two sides of the same coin. The world around us is uncertain. It presents us with many options at all times, and decisions are just the process that we use to navigate the uncertainty of the world. This also means that uncertainty and decision-making is what makes things interesting. If we didn't have any decisions to make, if we didn't have uncertainty, we wouldn't be who we are, because those decisions and the uncertainties that we have all faced are what have made us who we are today. It's what has brought us all into this room together tonight, is this long sequence of decisions that we made leading up until now. So they make us who we are. So this is something that kind of leads to an interesting paradox, at least for me, which is that while uncertainty and then decision-making in the face of it is both the interesting part of life and the thing that sort of defines us as human beings, we mostly try to avoid it. We mostly seek certainty, and we actually have a really large love for and a large respect for perceived certainty, to the extent that somebody can convince us to do something just by seeming certain about it. We tend to gravitate towards people who express beliefs with high certainty. We tend to avoid people who seem to be uncertain about stuff. And anytime we feel uncertain about stuff, we tend to feel bad about that fact. So this is interesting, right? Because if uncertainty is where all the fun is, why do we want certainty so much? There's a problem with certainty, which is that certainty is lazy. And at the end of this talk, we're gonna kind of round this off and explain really why. But the main gist of it is that certainty pretends that hard decisions are easy decisions, because there are no easy decisions. And that's what this talk is all about. So I'm going to start off with an example. We're going to come back to this example later on of what looks like an easy decision. So anyone who has played Tetris has an automatic gut response to this, excuse me, of where you'd want to put this block. So the decision I'm putting forth to you is put this block somewhere. For those who aren't familiar with Tetris, you can put it anywhere on this thing down here. The goal in Tetris is to, as new pieces come down, to fill up the space without leaving any gaps on any row. So again, the question, where to put this? So you'll come up with a decision. Some of you who might be unfamiliar will have just said, I don't know, and then decided not to decide. Those of you who play a lot of Tetris will have decided exactly where to put it, and I bet I know where. We'll come back to that later. But do you know why? Do you know how you made that decision? If you work backwards, you're going to start applying all kinds of rationales that explain why you made that great choice that you made, right? But did any of those really happen? Your brain did something automatic. It made a sequence of steps that produced a decision about what to do with this block. And you weren't even aware of that happening. The question is, what did your brain do? So decisions are not easy. There are no easy decisions. Even a seemingly simple decision actually has a whole bunch of stuff hidden behind the scenes, which is what we're going to get into. So back to certainty. Certainty is lazy, so it also pretends that intuitive decisions are better than conscious ones. This is sort of a general thing that we are taught for our entire lives, basically, which is that you should, speak from the heart and think with your gut. And these are good ways to deal with problems. These are things that are respected. But what intuitive decisions are cheap decisions. And there's a good reason for this. This isn't to say they're bad. They're cheap. They have a low cost. And this is because we are faced with so many decisions all day, every day, that we can't afford to expend enormous amounts of conscious energy processing all of those different decisions that have to be made. We need really fast, really cheap automated systems to do this. That's what intuition is. Intuition seeks patterns. Intuition looks at the current situation you're facing, digs through its memory banks to find a similar situation that seems metaphorically roughly the same, and then applies whatever it did then to what it's doing now. But it doesn't actually sit back and evaluate, are these really the same situation? Was that even a good decision I made the last time? It doesn't do that. But it feels really good to make an intuitive decision because it needs to, because we need to make lots of intuitive decisions all the time. But this is a problem when we want to make very careful, deliberate decisions about important things. Because the reason that intuition works is also the same reason that it falls apart when it's most important. Intuition comes from a collection of biases. There's an enormous list of them. I just put a few of the fun, common ones up here. If you've never dug into cognitive biases, I encourage you to go Google and go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole because it's really interesting and it'll teach you how your brain works. But there's nothing wrong with these, right? These are always presented in arguments and things where people say, oh, you're just using a confirmation bias here, right? You've messed up in your logic, you've done something wrong. But no, you've just done what your brain does automatically and what it does really well and what is frankly amazing. The reason that we get to just get around the world is because our brains do all of this. What we need to be able to do on top of that, though, is recognize when this has happened, when it's important, so that we can take a step back and ask, why did I make that decision? Should I have made a different one? So here's the goal of today's talk. Because intuition is cheap and is automatic, my hope is that you stop trusting it. That doesn't mean stop using it because you need it, but it means stop trusting it. I also want you to stop being enticed by certainty because I'm going to argue this whole time that certainty is a bad thing. Which means, hopefully, that we can all leave here being confidently uncertain, being confident about being uncertain. So, I don't know if we can pull this off, but this is the goal. Okay, so should you believe me? I said earlier that I wasn't going to talk much about myself, and I'm not. But there's a question here of, should you believe anything that I have to say? So I'm talking about decision making, so what do I know that's relevant to that? I did a PhD in cell molecular biology where I studied how cells make decisions. So that was years of my life just studying decision making in the context of cells. When I finished that, I joined my brothers as a co-founder at our game studio, where I focus on process improvement, which mostly means identifying problems that people are having and trying to figure out how to solve them better, which is just another form of decision making. And in preparation for this talk, I read a large stack of books about decision making, especially in the context of psychology, so that I could feel like I was kind of up to date with at least not the nitty gritty academic stuff, but at least kind of the high level stuff that summarizes what people think. But you still shouldn't believe anything I say, right? Because I'm not an expert in any of this, right? And actually, if anybody thinks they're an expert in something, you should distrust them immediately. I'm just a person who may have studied this more than most of you have, and maybe not even all of you. So what matters here is if what I say is useful. Does it seem like a useful way to think about the world? Does it seem like you can make use of the claims that I'm making and the way of thinking that I'm proposing? All right, so with that out of the way, let's actually dig into this. So when I sat down to do this talk, it was because I had realized there was a problem, which is that at work, I focus on process improvement. I focus on how do we do things better at all times whenever possible. But I realized that I never actually sat back to think, what if we take that all the way to the top and just do everything better? Because everything is just decisions, so why can't we just start there, right? So then I went down this rabbit hole of trying to address the question, what does it mean to make a decision? So as I kind of alluded to earlier from my history, this is a completely unsolved complex problem. People are tackling it in basically any domain you can think of. It's really big in computer science and all kinds of realms, including artificial intelligence. It's really big in various aspects of biology, and then of course psychology, which is the study of just how people actually think. So I encourage you, I'll show you some books at the end of this that I encourage you to go read, and I encourage you to dig into it because it's really cool, but the important point is that nobody knows. Nobody knows how we make decisions. So I'm obviously not going to tell you because how could I know, right? What I'm going to do is show you how I tried to get at this problem because I think it's really useful, and what I learned from doing it I think is very valuable. So I'm going to do what we always do in science and what we should all be doing all the time when solving a problem, which is if you're confronted with something complicated, don't even try to solve it. Give up literally immediately. Invent a simple problem that's a metaphor for it. That's similar enough that you can believe that once you have solved that simpler problem, it will teach you something about that complicated problem. Because once you've done that, you can now find another problem that's maybe a little more complicated. That's a little bit better of an approximation of this. So this is how science works. It's this iterative process where we start with easy things and make them harder and harder, and with the hope that someday maybe we'll actually talk about reality. We've never done it before, and really we never will, right? But that's the goal of all of science. So that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to start with that same decision I showed you earlier, which I'm casting as just a simple decision that's not so simple that it's boring, but still simple enough that it's surprising what the outcomes are. And the goal at the end of this, hopefully, is that we'll be able to take what we've learned from processing, thinking through step by step of a simple decision, and ask, how do we generalize this? Or can we? Okay. So, earlier I showed you this, you decided where to put it, and the question was, what were the steps your brain took to get you there? That's what we're going to try to find out. None of us knows, and you won't know at the end of it either, but hopefully you'll have a better idea. Step one. And this one to me was really interesting because I didn't even realize this was a step until I had been like 40 hours into putting this talk together. Because this step is invisible. When you're confronted with a decision to make, either you realize there's a problem or you don't. When you've realized there's a problem, you don't realize you've realized that. That doesn't even make any sense, right? When you haven't realized there's a problem, there's no way for you to realize that either, right? So this is an invisible step, which is actually really important. The problems that you get to see are fully dependent on your context. It's dependent on the context you're in the moment that problem presents itself to you. So what is context? Context is all the things you know, coupled with all the things you're aware of about the things you know right now when you're confronted with some problem. That also means that any two people may or may not even see a problem, which is a source of conflict in lots of relationships, right? Further, any two people might see the same problem, but see it differently because they have different context when coming to that problem. They know different things, they're aware of different things at that time. Which again, another source of conflict when people are trying to figure out what to do, when they're trying to make decisions together. Okay, so that's step one. Step one is realize there's even a problem. Step two, discover your options. So you've identified a problem, now you're trying to figure out what the possible options are that you can take, right? Here, this is all very straightforward. So looking at the situation, what are your options here? So those of you who play a lot of Tetris, so you're familiar with just thinking about this, or people who think about geometry a lot, will pretty quickly say, well, there are 7 options here. Right? Imagine these falling down all the way. But there are 7 options of places you could put this. But how did you know that? Like, what was it in your brain that said there are 7 things here? Depending on your context, you would have actually seen different options. And some of you might fairly argue there are actually only 4 options here, but I'm not going to go into that or talk about it. So even further, what if we looked outside the constraints? I told you what the problem was. I defined the problem for you. I gave you the constraints, but what if you looked outside of them? Could there be more options here? This brings us to one of the core philosophies of our studio and of just my life also, which is that there is always one option present anytime you're confronted with a decision that you have to make, which is just, can we not? Can I not do this thing? Can I not make this decision? This one is always an option. Often the answer is no, we cannot not, but this is a question you can always ask, and you should, because it makes a remarkable filter for identifying important stuff. But yeah, so that's the important point here, is that the options that you see are dependent on your context. So what is your context? So your context comes from association. So in your mind, you basically have a kind of a web of information that's all kind of moving around, right? When you're aware of something, that allows you to trigger awarenesses of things that are similar to it, because your brain works by moving across things that are metaphorically the same. So if I say, don't think of a polar bear, you've all immediately thought of a polar bear, right? And also a whole bunch of other things related to polar bears in your mind, right? I've just created a web inside of your brain of things that you can now use when you're trying to navigate options and making decisions. So this is done through association. So what does this mean? This means if you want to have more options at your disposal, you need to work on that web of association. So the web has two parts. One is just things you know, and the other part is things you know and are aware of right now. So learning is basically just being more aware, or just having more things that you know, more things that you can pull into your awareness. Then you can use collaboration and any other form of chaos, which I'm calling chaos just any outside influences coming in. You can use these to start moving around in your web. Just like when I suddenly said, don't think of a polar bear, right? Suddenly now all of you were. I just changed all of your semantic web into processing information. So this is great, because if you're trying to solve a problem, all you need to do is change stuff. You just need to be around new things. You need to learn more stuff, and now you get access to more options. But you can't know that you've discovered all the options. And if we think back to this very example where I said, now you can think outside of the context I gave you and ask, can we just not even play the game? There can at all times be some hidden thing that you haven't thought about. And even if there's not, there's no way that you get to know that. It's impossible to know that you've discovered all options. This has a sort of a consequence, which is that even if there is a best option for this decision you're trying to make, you cannot know that you have found it. You cannot know that it's in your pool of options available to you to choose from. Which I think is a good thing. We'll talk about that later. But so this brings us to, what do we actually do about this? So you can never know that you've exhausted all of your options. You can never know that you found the best option. There could always be another one waiting around the corner. You cannot know. So this brings us to, I think, and this was to me one of the most important kind of lessons from going through this process, which is the idea of optimal stopping. This is taken from computer science, so it's in other domains as well. The idea is there are some problems that actually can't really be solved, such as exhausting a search of some large space. And so the idea is you have to choose when to stop. This is because of this idea that options have diminishing value. I'm going to refer to this as the good enough principle, because that's what we call it in the studio, which is basically when you just say, I've done enough, like I've gone far enough. But the idea here is actually a simple one that's fairly profound, which is that if you've already got 100 options at your disposal, adding one more option, what's the probability of that one being better than all the 100 you already have? It's 1/101, right? And that gets worse and worse and worse. So every time you add a new option, the likelihood of that being the best one continues to go down, which could be fine if there were a finite number, but you don't even know if there are. It could also be fine if there wasn't a cost associated with finding your options, but there is. There's a time cost. And as any of you will know, if you sat down to brainstorm a list of something, to make a pro-con list, to do anything that required you to jot down a bunch of stuff in your associative memory about something, you can do it a bunch very quickly, and all of a sudden you're done, right? All the ones after that are now very difficult. And usually you require some sort of external stimulus, brainstorming or whatever, a change in scenery to accumulate more ideas. Every new idea comes with increasing cost, but diminishing value. So this is why you need optimal stopping. So basically what I've told you here is that in order for us to make a decision, we have to decide when to stop discovering more options. So you may notice this is an interesting problem here, right? We now have to make another decision in order to make this one decision we're trying to make. So we're going to come back to that. frequently, actually. So, okay. So that was step 2, which I hope you found was a little bit more interesting than you were expecting when I first started with just list your outcomes, right? Sorry, list your options. So now we're going to list your outcomes, which is basically what would happen? What would happen if you chose each one of those options at your disposal? And so I say simulate because you don't get to know. You don't get to know what's going to happen until you've decided the thing has actually happened and you see the actual outcome. So these are simulated. This is just your best guess at what's going to happen when you choose any one of these options. So looking at our example here, if you chose any of those 7 spots, what happens next? Again, for Tetris players, let's just say, put it at the bottom right. For Tetris players, you know, well, another thing is going to come, right? It's going to fall down the middle, it's going to slowly fall, and you have to decide where to put it. This could be any one of 7 different pieces, and it's got to go somewhere. So all of your simulated outcomes are all the different things that can happen next after you put that block down. But why stop there? We could go 2 turns from now, or 3 turns, right? And ask, well, okay, so I put my first piece down there, then if I put my second piece there, then my third piece now, I have to decide where to put that too. So we've already just in 3 pieces reached combinatorial explosion territory. This is why when people talk about the game of chess, they say, oh, it has more possible move combinations than there are atoms in the universe, right? It's because of this, because this explodes really, really fast. So what does that mean? We're predicting our future decisions because we can't know what they are. And it means we need another decision to choose an optimal stopping point to stop simulating, to stop looking for more and more forward into the future. In fact, we have to make 2 decisions, because one is you have to decide how to simulate it in the first place. So all of you Tetris players just simulated it in your brains because you played this game enough that your brain did it automatically and you have no idea how it did it. Those of you who haven't played but are really familiar with geometry probably were moving it around in your minds also in a slower, more visual way. Those of you not familiar with either are probably very slowly cogitating through this stuff, right? Which doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your brain, you just have a different context that doesn't allow you to process it in the same way. So even if you're doing this mentally, everyone's doing it differently. But of course, if you're a computer scientist, you could write a program to do this for you. Or if you are a statistician, you might put some math together that predicts some of this stuff for you. So you get to choose. And you have to make 2 choices to simulate your outcomes. Okay, so we have realized there's a problem. We have delineated all of the options at our disposal. We have simulated what will happen with each of those possible options. So now we need to choose from among them, right? Which means we need a goal. We need a thing we're trying to accomplish with this decision. So what makes a goal reasonable? How do we actually choose that? So a goal is going to be guided by the options that you've uncovered, which means any 2 people who have uncovered different sets of options will actually have different goals at their disposal, as well as the outcomes that you simulated. So if you chose different outcomes, different simulation methods, different stopping points, you may have a different set of goals. And finally, your actual context, which just says, what do you actually even care about right now? So if you are a statistician writing a dissertation on all the things that can happen in Tetris, you might have a very different set of goals here than somebody playing this on the toilet. So importantly, there's no right goal. There's a goal that makes sense given your context and what you've come up with so far. So this is yet another decision that you have to make. So let's just choose one just to kind of get it out of the way. So let's just say the goal that I'm going to choose is to make it so that my next move is as easy as possible. That's how I'm going to position this, and I think intuitively that's what our brains are doing for those of us who play a lot of Tetris. So which place is that? We need to find out somehow, right? We need a ranking system. We need a way to say, given all of the outcomes and given our goal, how close does each one actually come to that? You need a way to measure that. Because otherwise, how do you know that one outcome is better than another? You have to have some way to do it. But again, there's no one way. There's no right way. You have to decide on that. So in this case, I'm pretty sure, though I haven't actually checked it because I don't know how, that the edge is the optimal place for this. To me, this makes intuitive sense, which means I also don't trust it. But it also feels like all of my possible next moves have to be easier because there's just more space. You know, like feels good, right? But so that, for me, that was my ranking system. My ranking system was how much open space do I have left? That doesn't mean it's even a good ranking system. That's the one that I have access to that feels like it makes sense to me, right? But somebody else planning maybe 100 steps in the future using a statistical method in a supercomputer might say, oh, actually the middle is better on average given infinite games of Tetris. So I don't know. Seemed right, right? But here we're left with an interesting problem. Which edge do I put it on? These edges are the same because Tetris is a symmetrical game. So how do I decide here? Now I have a ranking system, and no matter what my ranking system is, if it's based on anything interesting, it's going to say these are the same. So now how do I choose? And this was another important lesson that, again, I just hadn't thought about until I sat down to do this, that is enormously valuable, which is when it doesn't matter what you choose, it doesn't matter how you choose. It just doesn't matter. You just need some way to choose. And so this is really important if you're like in a grocery store, trying to choose between two things, like, I just don't know which one of these is better. You have no way to know. You can't know. You just need some sort of a system. So I think my favorite example of this is my brother Seth used to run a World of Warcraft guild, and anytime they were in a dungeon, their rule was always go left. Just always go left. When you tell me, if you hit a fork in the road, go left. Why? Not because that was a good decision, but because you need to go a direction. You can't know ahead of time which direction is better. They're equal to you. So just have a system, have a rule. The beauty of this is if you apply this to your everyday life, if you apply this to work, it cuts down on an enormous amount of anxiety because a lot of the decisions that we struggle with are these ones, the ones where we don't know whether something is better than the other. If that's true, it's because either we have a bad ranking system, or actually it's basically the only possible option, right? We have a bad ranking system, which is either something we need to fix, have a better ranking system, or something we can't fix. And so you just need a new way to make a decision. And you get to choose it, flip a coin, doesn't matter. Okay, so we made it to the end. This is now the model summary of what we came up with, built off of a simple decision, simple quote unquote, which goes like this. So first, we're going to define the problem. Being able to even see it depends on the context. How you define it depends on your context. Next, we're going to discover all of the options that we have at our disposal. So we can't find them all, it's impossible, and we wouldn't want to because that's too costly. So you need a way to stop. You need a way to stop it and call something good enough. We need a way to simulate outcomes. And so you need to choose how you're going to do it. Usually this is just being done in your brain. And again, we need to be able to stop it good enough. At some point, you have to stop looking forward into the future. Then we need to choose a goal and choose a ranking method so that we can actually check our outcomes against that goal. Then just pick the best one. And in the case of ties, choose randomly, it doesn't matter. Okay, so this is what I came up with after going through this step-by-step process of decision making. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, I don't think this is really how it works. Like, why choose a goal there instead of maybe at the beginning? Or really actually almost anywhere in this position. Also, I don't usually identify the entire problem and then go through this process. I go through a piece of the process, identify new things, refine the problem, and go back through it again, right? That's because of this. So I presented a purposely simplified view of how this works, because again, that's convenient. It actually gets to teach us something. I got to learn personally a few lessons, and I hope I got to convey to you in doing it, but that doesn't mean we actually learned how it works. It means we learned useful aspects of how it works that we can actually take advantage of. This is closer to the truth, right? Probably, but also still not true. This is an approximation. So the idea here is that actually, yeah, you can choose a goal at any time. You can change your goal at any time, depending on what your problem is, because the key to all of this is context. Every time you do anything in here, your context changes. Every time your context changes, it changes the options available to you. It changes the problems that you get to see. It changes how you see your ranking system, right? So every time anything in your brain changes, your context is now different. Decision making is just a series of steps that are changing your brain, which means this is even one step more complicated than this, because this whole pattern needs an optimal stopping point, right? When you sit down to make a decision, this is what your brain is doing, at least approximately, right? You need some way to say, okay, I think I've done enough, right? I've chosen something, and I think I need to move forward now. The point of all this is that, again, in the same way that just for discovering your options, you can't find the best one because there isn't one, it's the same deal with making a decision as a whole. You don't get to make the best decision. It's not available to you, right? And again, it would be so costly to do that that you wouldn't want to, because you have other decisions to make. You can recover from a bad decision because you have infinitely more ahead of you. Okay, so what have we learned? Like I said, there is no best decision, but this is a freedom, right? This doesn't mean that now you have to be worried because you're never going to have the best one. This means nobody gets to have the best one. Nobody ever does. Nobody ever has. You're just free from that. It takes a little bit of adjustment, but you're free from that idea. You don't have to have the best solution because you get to embrace early stopping. Embrace the good enough principle so that you can just make a decision and move on with your life. Your goal obviously is still to make a good decision, right? To make the best among the options at your disposal and find as many good options as you can within a reasonable cost and time frame. But again, the goal is not to find the best solution. This also means that decisions are only good or bad in retrospect because you can't know the outcome of a decision until you've made it and the outcome has happened. So presumably you're doing the best you can and trying to make a good decision, right? In that case, something will happen now. Once that thing happens, it's going to teach you, it's going to provide context that you didn't have when you made that decision. So it will tell you in retrospect that that was a bad or a good decision, which now you just get to learn from. It's not a judgment, right? It doesn't change anything about how you made that decision. It's just an opportunity to learn. And some of the things you might learn be about how you make decisions, which is great. Now you get to apply that to every future decision you make for the rest of time. This also means if you're stuck, if you're trying to make a decision and just can't quite, if you're just stuck on it, just add associations to it, right? Try some random stuff to kickstart this loop, like inserting something into somebody else's brain or having them insert something into your brain just by having a discussion. That's going to change what becomes available to you, changes your context, and makes you able to identify new things and make new, different decisions. And if you're really stuck, like you're stuck with multiple options that all seem to be the same, just be dumber. Choose one at random. Always go left. Doesn't matter. Do something, right? But you just get to make that decision and just move on. So I was trying to, as I was doing this and kind of looking at this model, I was trying to think of how certainty fits in with this. Because obviously when you look at that, when you look at how much of a recursive, iterative, infinite spaghetti this thing is, this process of making a decision, it seems completely absurd that anybody would be confident about something. That anybody would be certain about something, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So I was trying to decide how does this fit in with this model? And the best I could come up with for now is that certainty to me seems to be having chosen a ranking system that just doesn't care what your options are, right? So now if that option is on the table, that's the one you pick because it just gets top billing, which goes right back to the very beginning when I said certainty is lazy. So what else have we learned? No one else knows what they're doing. They can't know. So if you ever feel like you're kind of swimming around and like everybody seems to have their stuff together and you just don't, they don't. Nobody does, right? You can't. It's impossible. All you can do is just the best you can and keep learning from the things that you've done, retrospectively. And importantly, this puts all of the control back on you, which is a big responsibility, but is also, again, very uplifting and freeing, right? Because you're the person closest to the problem you're solving right now. You're the one with the context, especially when they're your problems. So that means you're the one who has the most information that they can use in this decision-making machine. And so it's all on you. You don't need to look outside, right? Though you can use that to kickstart your associative understanding of the world, but it's all on you. You get to make that decision. So here's sort of the summary. My goal was to say, like, look, thinking is super hard. Like, we all know that. As a scientist, a lot of how I approach any kind of problems that I face is by trying to understand them more deeply, because I believe that by understanding a thing, you take its power away, and you get to keep it for yourself. So my goal here is to show you, hopefully, why. And not like all of why, right? But to give you kind of a glimpse into why it is that thinking and making decisions and all of us just moving ahead in life is difficult. It is difficult. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're clearly wrong, right? It's a difficult process. So our brains are lazy and biased. But here we are, right? It's amazing. So if you just think a little bit, if you just like sit back and just ask, like, how do I do this better? If I sit down and actually think about something instead of just letting my brain automatically do it for me, you're probably going to do better. And you're already doing fine, right? So there's just nothing to worry about here. So, which is all to say that I hope that everybody can learn to embrace uncertainty instead of fearing it, because uncertainty, again, is where all the fun is. It's what lets you control your life and be who you are. So that should allow you to hopefully be confidently uncertain. So with that, I think I don't know how we're gonna do questions, we'll deal with that afterwards. But we have some more talks up on the internet. Seth has one that's much more uplifting than this one, probably, so that would be a good one to check out. And we talk about this stuff on our podcast a lot, so if you're interested in diving deeper, do that. These are sort of the core books that I drew from for a lot of what I presented here. And they're super good. They are easily accessible no matter what your academic background is or what your focus is on. And so I can't recommend enough reading those books because for me anyway, they changed how I see the world, and I hope that they'll do the same for you. And so that's all I got. Thanks.